Hey YouTube, it's Noah here, and I was at VidCon recently, and I met ViHart, one of my favorite YouTubers, and I was talking to her for a bit, and I was telling her about the way I think about numbers, and she told me that I should make a video about it. When I was a very small child, like like in kindergarten, I started having to deal with numbers and think about them, and I think it was in first grade where I really developed this way of thinking, you know, all the way throughout. And it was a way of understanding numbers narratively. So to begin, like any good computer scientist, we're starting at zero. And zero is almost a god-type figure in this hierarchy of numbers. Not a hierarchy of numbers, but, in this spectrum or way of thinking about numbers. He's very powerful. He's able to either lift you up quite highly or put you down quite deeply, mainly on his decisions, but often on yours, especially on who you multiply or divide with, because a lot of these relationships are based around not only what the numbers look like when written, but also what other numbers you get when you add, multiply, subtract, and divide them. And so let's move on from 0 to 1, who is not very powerful at all, in a great contrast to 0. And 1 at times almost has no gender. And a thing that you'll notice and might complain about with the genders of all my numbers is that they're mostly male. And I don't know why this is, I just have always seen primarily male characters in the writings of numbers. 1 is not very powerful. 1 is very passive, in fact. And, a lot of people side with 1 because 1 doesn't really, pose any threat to them, but 1 is not a very powerful number, so he's not considered very highly, and he can give you some level of power, certainly the power of 10 in fact, but only in very specific situations, never by directly dealing with him. He is technically the power of 10, but he's not. 2 is very interesting, because if I were to cast a movie of this because if I was to cast a movie of this and was casting 2, I would have a young woman between the ages of 18 and 23, and she is very nice but also highly manipulative. This is because she is very similar to her mother, 4, who is even more manipulative and evil, almost a Cruella de Vil type character. Now, 2 on her own is a little less evil, a little more understanding, a little more likable of a character than 4, but both of them are exceedingly sexual characters, and they both use that facet of themselves to their advantage. Then we come to 3, who is the father of 2. This particular relationship between 4 and 3 is not the proper one. 4 is actually cheating on her proper husband, 5, with 3, and this makes 3 continually nervous. And 3 is always a nervous wreck because of how much power he wields as 3, the first odd prime, but also never really is able to fully realize his own power, and he's always worried about misusing it and being found out by 5. But he doesn't have any bad feelings towards 5. He thinks 5 is very, powerful, and he respects 5 a lot. 5 is a military man. He's a very stern, loud, strong military man, and there's a bird over there. Anyway, he's very strong and powerful, and his son from 4 is 6. And 6, if you look very closely, is very similar to 5 and could be very similar, but he takes after his mother with his emotions, and that he has a lot of them. And he's often, or at least I often think of him as a very emotional character and a very emotionally depressed character. And he has a very poor relationship with his father, and he's always looking up to other male figures in this number spectrum, other male figures such as 7, who is the coolest number there is. 7, even when you look at him, is just super cool. Like he's sitting back, leaning back on whatever it is, and he's, being cool. And 7 is also insane, especially if you look at the way in which he multiplies, which is insane. He's a prime, and he really has no rhyme or reason to the way in which he behaves with other numbers, and that's why people like him and are interested in him. Moving on to 8, we have a much more stoic character. A number who sits and thinks and really considers. He's the first perfect cube. He's got a lot of stuff figured out. He doesn't have everything figured out, but he understands a lot and he gets it. Now then we have 9, who is a very interesting woman. She is my favorite female character, but still not a female who I would like to encounter in real life. You'll notice that the majority of these numbers or characters are not very positive characters. They all have fundamentally negative character traits. And that's why I call this a deep Italian drama, because they're all behind one another's backs and fighting with each other. And 9's very similar to 7 in her demeanor. She's a little wild, a little crazy, but she is not a leader in the way that 7 is a leader. But she is a compulsive liar, in that with addition, she'll promise that she'll move you to the next tens place, but she'll always take a little bit from that. When 4 adds to 9, 13 comes out, and that is not satisfactory, I would say. That is, I would think, a swindle. But that is kind of how I think about these numbers and their relationships and how they relate with one another. And I've written things about this and done monologues about this, but for some reason I've never done a video on it. So thank you, ViHart, for making me do a video on this.